can't just accept the legendary accounts. Like, I can't believe, you know, that there was monsters living on the island and all of these things, because I haven't witnessed it with my own eyes. And what's interesting about this book, the one from 1726, written nearly 300 years ago, he considers these legendary stories, and he, I wouldn't say debunks them, but he critically analyzes them and gives, in my opinion, some much better accounts for explaining these things. So you have two basic periods in Irish history of the waves of migration. You have the people who came before the Great Flood, and then you have the people who arrived after the Great Flood. Now, for Christian writers like Geofrey Keating, who wrote this book, The General History of Ireland, because he was writing at a very Christianized time, he had to check the facts according to Scripture. So in the Bible it says that, you know, the flood happened and everybody was wiped out except for the people on Noah's Ark. Geofrey Keating is of the opinion that, like, nobody survived the flood in Ireland, so therefore there couldn't have been anybody around to tell the tale of these people. But nonetheless, we have an account of this group of people that were called the Cesarians. Now, I think this is really interesting. Caesar was a granddaughter of Noah. So it goes straight back to the bloodline of Noah. And Caesar's father wasn't able to get onto the ark. Noah wouldn't let them onto the ark, so they had to come up with an alternative. And what Caesar decided to do was to construct a religious idol, and they'd call upon it for guidance. And they got this, I guess you could call it a spark of divine inspiration, and they decided to build a boat. The best way to survive a flood is to build a boat. And they got a group of 50 women and 3 men, and the men were called Bith, Fintan and Ladra, and they sailed on the sea for 7 years. And when they arrived in Ireland, it was just 40 days before the Great Flood began. This was around the time of 2361 BC, and they landed at a place called Doon na Mark in Bantry Bay, down in Cork, which adds a lot of validity to the claims of local Cork people that the true and rightful capital of Ireland is actually the fine county of Cork. But each of the men who went on this excursion with the 50 women agreed to a just division of a quote magnificent maidens, and that's a quote from the old texts. They divided out these magnificent maidens amongst themselves, so they had no less than 16 wives each. And Caesar, the protagonist, the female protagonist here, was the wife of Fintan MacBocra. There's a really famous book of Irish history called the Lebor Gabhála Éren, and this is where a lot of the information I'm going to be talking about comes from. The Lebor Gabhála Éren means the Book of Invasions of Ireland. And in the book, there's a passage at section 26 that says, "I am Fintan, the white son of Bocra. I shall not conceal it. After the flood, here I am, a noble great sage." And this is where it gets interesting. This is where the history mixes with the legend, because he's saying, after the flood, here I am, a noble great sage. Yet, we're supposed to believe that nobody survived this flood. But the legend goes that after the other 2 men who he came over with died for different reasons, Ladra and Bith both died within a short time of arriving here in the island. And one of the accounts says that Fintan, now finding himself with 50 women, decided to flee. It's probably just too much trouble on his hands. So Fintan fled, and without giving you an explanation for this, it just says that he turned into a fish. He turned into a salmon, and in this form, as a salmon, he was able to survive in what the text says was an unbroken sleep at a place called the Hill of the Wave. And then he later changed into a hawk, and then finally became a man who would be known as Fintan the Wise, the White Ancient One, the noble great sage who would be an advisor to the people who were yet to come. So Fintan the Wise is a very interesting character in Irish mythology, a very ancient character. I guess you could say he's the oldest character in Irish mythology, and he was believed to be a storehouse of knowledge and wisdom of era. and it's said that he lived long enough to witness the adventures of the hero Fionn McCool, and even the advent of Christianity in Ireland, which was in the 5th century. So that's, if you want to believe these claims, he lived for 3,000 years. Because Christianity came about 3,000 years after the first people arrived in Ireland, the Cesarians. So, aside from Fintan, there wasn't any survivors of the Cesarian people. But I guess Fintan was the guy who survived and lived to tell the story.